Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Muetaz Al-Khatib, the MA Program Director in Applied Islamic Ethics at the College of Islamic Studies, and the Editor-in-Chief of Studies in Islamic Ethics series published by Broad. So it's my pleasure to be here with you with this very interesting panel with my colleagues here. So the title of the panel is Dialectics and Legal Hermeneutics in Islamic Thought. This session focuses on Islamic jurisprudence and dialectical reasoning in this field, in this discipline. In this panel, we explore how dialectical reasoning and linguistic analysis have historically shaped Islamic legal theory, al-Fiqh, and how these methods remain relevant in addressing contemporary epistemological and legal questions. The papers we will hear today from our colleagues here span from critical textual analysis of unexplored works to comparative studies across legal schools, offering us diverse and rich engagement with the logic, language, and methods of Islamic jurisprudence. The first speaker is Muhammad Sinan Kaneth. Muhammad Sinan Kaneth. He's going to speak about Kitab Al-Īḍāḥ in medieval Jadal, textual analysis, comparison, and its significance in contemporary debates and dialogue. Muhammad Sinan is a researcher in the study of religion at Darul Huda Islamic University, with a focus on the sociology and anthropology of Islam. His paper discusses Ibn al-Jawzi's Al-Īḍāḥ book, Al-Īḍāḥ fi al-Jadal, a 12th century treatise on dialectical reasoning. Through detailed textual analysis and selective comparison with classical works, the author highlights the methodological significance of the Ibn al-Jawzi's legal framework and its potential for enriching contemporary argumentation, especially in grounding in Usūl al-Fiqh, Islamic legal theory. So I will give 15 minutes sharply for each speaker. So please, I was asked to give less than 15, but I will give you 15 as the maximum. So please, the floor is yours, Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Muhammad Sinan Kaneth, a young researcher doing currently my master's at Darul Huda Islamic University, which is a leading Islamic university from Kerala district of India. And so it would be very familiar to introduce Darul Huda here because our students, graduates, and professors are part of Qatar debate since its inception as juries, debaters, and representatives, and others. Coming to the topic, basically this is a manuscript study. The very interesting thing to be introduced here is that since we have been trained about for 12 years in Islamic tradition and particularly legal texts, law texts, and jurisprudence, hadith literature, Quran literature, since my 11th age, I have been trained immensely in Islamic tradition. So this very background have laid a basis for my interest for focusing or bringing my attention, academic interest into manuscript studies. Since we have been largely taught and trained in Islamic studies, there is very interestingly a highly dominating academia called Islamic Studies one, but the very literal or the very final attempt would be the legal or direct access to the manuscripts which shape the Islamic intellectual corpus, Islamic intellectual traditions. So I find an existing problem, because many of the scholars, even from Western scholars, they are not directly or very meticulously accessing into the manuscripts, original manuscripts. Translations are very wider and very possibly available, but there will be missing many such kind of deeper or a close look to the manuscript or the intent of the author. So very basically, this was my part of interest that bring into this topic. As part of my investigation, I found, very fortunately, in Ibn Khaldun University's archival platform, there was Kitab al-Īḍāḥ. Talking about Īḍāḥ, it's very interesting to share that, like its other counterparts, having its temporal significance in medieval times, as well as like my title indicates too. I will read my title: Al-Īḍāḥ in Medieval Jadal, Textual Analysis, Comparison and its Significance in Contemporary Debate and Disputation. My dear audience, if you very carefully look into my topic, there are many things to be broken down. The first thing is Al-Īḍāḥ, which indicates to the kind of study I am conducting here, which is manuscript study. And another thing is medieval, which actually calling us back, invites us back to a larger period in which Islamic intellectualism or Muslim intellectualism has thrived, and the Jadal tradition. In Munāẓarah and Jadal, I focus into Jadal. In this Jadal discourse, this Kitab al-Īḍāḥ being a humble text written by the famous author Ibn al-Jawzi, as we repeatedly we remark, we describe, we hear, we cite Ibn al-Jawzi. His son Yousef Ibn al-Jawzi actually is the author of this book. Like you see, the driving thesis behind my work is that the work remains in the archive largely understudied or ignored by the researchers, and there are still limitations with my research because it was not physically available in my hand, but an annotated version by the Syrian author Mahmoud al-Sayyid al-Duaim, which was published in Cairo in 1991, was available on internet, and I worked on it, and I just entered into analysis and a comparison with very prominent texts, which is first one is Al-Manhul and second one is Al-Kafiyya fil Jadal, and I am recalling or reinventing its significance into contemporary debate and dialogue. So what is I am presenting here is a Jawzian legal framework, or I would describe it for the sake of bringing a new framework. The very peculiarity of this framework is, as you see, this text is very terminologically very bonded. This text presents a technical version or a very fundamental or very rudimental version of debating, classical debating, Munāẓarah or Jadal. As the text progresses, it firstly introduced its methodology, very written in terminologies or bringing terminologies as a key feature, salient feature of the book is very peculiar of this work. As the title itself indicates to, Kitab al-Īḍāḥ liqawānīn al-Istilāḥ. Al-Istilāḥ, which means terminologies. So the legal terminologies or familiarizing the legal terminologies would be an inquisitive attempt made by the author itself, which also calls our attention into another question. were the terminologies were unfamiliar in classical thought prior to the onset of this work. Actually, there are many results or many findings that yet to be confirmed by me, but I can argue that actually Yousef Ibn al-Jawzi, the author, has made a remarkable shift, has made a departure from its classical precedents, like Al-Manhul and Al-Kafiyya fil Jadal wal-Juwayni. What is of very possible criticism to my work is that, like I have been received some reviews on my paper. Actually, this work comes in Hanbali tradition, and I'm comparing with Shafi'i texts. What's the logic behind that, or what's my parameter? It is very clear that Hanbali doctrine has only a substandard or has only developed after long tradition of Shafi'i tradition, or after the indoctrination of Shafi'i thought after many years. And I would actually looking to, as the title itself calls us, we are looking for the significance of this work in the contemporary debate and dialogue. And academia largely citing Shafi'i texts. As part of my investigation, I have inclined to know that Shafi'i texts have been largely cited and have been put into practice, like defeasible reasoning and many other reasoning when incorporating into contemporary legal theoretical apparatus that support even the Qatar debate format. There are very similar or parallels that can be found in our theoretical framework, which have similarities or which have a very legitimate citation to Shafi'i text. So what I am doing is that upbringing or upgrading a text that is still remaining ignored or remaining understudied to the level of Shafi'i text, meanwhile meeting its temporal significance. Talking about the methodology, I have blended a number of things, which one is comparison, and I have included some possible criticism if viewed from contemporary disciplines like critical theories, feminism, structuralism. In the lens of these post-colonial or post-critical theories, we can find many criticism to these works. As a blend of comparison and criticism, I have developed this analytical methodology into 5 parts. You can see in the very following session. The first part is introduction, in which the historical context has been laid down. The very inquisitive part of this work is that the medieval time was largely dominated by the intercourse or the interrelationship or the very collaborative working of umaras and ulamas. And there was very stirring political chaos regarding intellectualism. Also, the work of elaborating on knowledge or knowledge production, as we call today, was assigned or ordained by rulers to ulamas itself. There were, on some points, on some grounds, there were differences, there were disagreements. But very meticulously blending these disagreements into producing a larger legal theoretical framework was the success of the medieval age. Slightly eliciting this historical background, I am just heading to, in my paper, prologue to the text, which shows the very physical or the premises of the text, its location of the manuscript, who annotated the manuscript, the physical descriptions of the manuscript, and things like that are laid down in prologue to the text. And the next part is the very core part of my work, which is analysis of the text. To be very honest,
3 minutes.
I actually worked 6 months. For 6 months for annotating the annotated version, and I have made another annotation on this work based on some usul works. The annotated work by Mahmoud al-Said al-Tayyib. As part of this, I have made a text-wise, chapter-wise analysis, and then an overall analysis, which would very deeply interact the text or extract from the text from methodological frameworks, and that's very peculiar with linguistics. There are very largely, I viewed this text from contemporary disciplines like linguistics, and there is sociology, and there is feminism. Because our Islamic legal corpus largely dealing with various types of topics, and which are also houseful to very controversies today, like discourses related with women. But all these, rather than presenting an apologetic version of Usūl al-Fiqh or Kitab al-Īḍāḥ, I have also included some criticism in the perspective of feminist theory. And the important results will be this research, the very thesis I have been driven with is the major impression created by my work. I would believe is that bringing into academic attention this work that would serve as a antecedent to enriching our framework, our debating framework, with the help of medieval text like Kitab al-Īḍāḥ, which is only an example for enriching or contributing a larger amount of knowledge framework assistance to our existing contemporary legal corpus. Talking from the aspect of or the viewpoint of Qatar debate, we can also incorporate many theories laid down by author Yousef Kamal into our debating practices, because since the argumentation, the field of argumentation itself is highly dominated by scholasticism from Christian tradition and also Muslim intellectualism. We have been continuing, we have been disclosing, we have been exposing a mixture, a disciplinary mix, we are starting from a continuum, because after medieval period there was assumptionally there was a continuum or a very large vacuum where text in the very field of Usūl al-Fiqh or Islamic juridical dialectics were off from their stage. And Qatar debate would be doing a very good job if we incorporating this kind of classical thoughts into our contemporary legal practices, debating practices. The very stressing idea I would be recurring here is that the aspect of law should be incorporated or should be integrated into our debating conceptions. The conceptualization we are nurturing upon our perceptions regarding the debating, that should not be only dealing with raw ideas, that should be extended to the field of law. Like we have many subfields in this second edition of ICDD. So the part of law or Islamic jurisprudence is also should be considered widely. And this would be some more recommendation from our audience.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
17 minutes. You have taken 17 minutes.
In one sentence, I'm about to ending. I very importantly, I would ending my research or my presentation by sharing that there are some limitations for my research, because it's not physically handled, and there is the incorporation of theory, the incorporation of what Islamic juridical, dialectics, Usūl al-Fiqh into Munāẓarah is a very turning point in this book. And the very point to what extent this has been done by others, to what, in what meticulous point did they take a turn from what would Ghazālī Imam is described as the syllogization of traits, of syllogization of qiyas tradition, like deductive reasoning. How this has been incorporated into.
This is a very long sentence to conclude with. So I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you because we are late and we passed the
Okay.
time that we have. Thank you very much, Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Kitab Al-Īḍāḥ, the book entitled Al-Īḍāḥ by Al-Jawzi, so was quoted intensively by some classical works, including Al-Bahr al-Muḥīṭ by Abi Hayyan, by Zarkashi, sorry, and by Al-Mirdawi in his book Al-Tahrir, Al-Tahbir Sharh al-Tahrir, sorry, and by other classical works. So I think the term was used here, understudied or unexplored, needs to be revised and limited to, maybe you are referring to the English literature, not the Arabic literature, the classical and the contemporary. So it was studied in the Arabic literature, classically and contemporary, but maybe you are referring to the English literature. So maybe you need to just minimize this or modify this term. So the next speaker is Muhammad Jassim. He's going to speak about linguistic debates in Islamic jurisprudence, a comparative study of the Shafi'i and Hanafi schools. So Muhammad Jassim is a researcher in Islamic and human sciences with a focus on civilizational studies and interdisciplinary methods, currently pursuing a BA in English literature. So Muhammad Jassim is going to speak about this comparative analysis between the Shafi'i and the Hanafi school. His paper examines how the Hanafi and Shafi'i schools diverge in legal rulings due to different linguistic strategies, particularly through a case study on the interpretation of the term lens, touch. It shows how each school employs reasoning tools like ijtihad and qiyas, with the Hanafis favoring grammatical structures and the Shafi'is emphasizing textual semantics. So you have 15 minutes. Please try to be within the available time.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Myself, Muhammad Jassim, I'm a final year degree student. So as for time, I'm just coming to my topic. My topic is linguistic debates in Islamic jurisprudence, a comparative study of Shafi'i and Hanafi schools. So as we all know, Islamic jurisprudence relies deeply on language. Words in Quran are just not just language; they are legal foundation. This study explores how different interpretation of the Quranic terms and Hadith terms, like lams and the term Quran, produce divergent legal rulings in Shafi'i and Hanafi schools. The central question of my research is how does language shape Islamic laws? So the study draws on linguistic hermeneutics, especially from scholars like Hallad, who notes the Quranic language acts as a vessel of divine will, and Shafi'is, who is following the Usul al-Fiqh based on Shafi'i Imam's Al-Risala, emphasize textual literation, Wahid, and words must be taken at the face of value unless there is a clear reason to read otherwise. In contrast, Hanafis, particularly who is following Al-Sarkashi in their Usuls, and they adopt the contextual pragmatism, valuing public custom of its linguistic and juristic preference to interpret meanings. However, as a counterpart, Shafis also consider urf, but only in social dealings and when it does not contradict the explicit revelation. So the methodology I have used here is a qualitative and comparative method, analyzing the primary sources like Al-Risala, Usul al-Zarkashi, Tafsir al-Jassas, and Al-Baghawi, along with insights from modern scholars like Kamali and Halal. The two case studies are chosen here from the two terms of Quran. The term lams in Surah Nisa 43 and the Quran. And they are not random. I have chosen these two terms. There are also some other terms which have these linguistic differences in both madhabs. But I have taken these two terms because of some reason that I will be saying. So, as we know, the lams in the Quran, the term lams in the case of ablution, the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence interprets as it as touch. So, any physical contact with a non-mahram individuals makes us take ablution. So, in Hanafi, the Hanafi school of jurisprudence interpret it as sexual intercourse. So ordinary contact don't break law. Al-Shāfi'ī in Al-Risala argues that the literal meaning must be followed unless a clear evidence says otherwise. Al-Sarkashi, who is, as we know, the Hanafi Imam haven't written any usul. So I have referred here Al-Sarkashi, which is considered as one of the basic, one of the basics in usul Hanafi. So Al-Sarkashi, however, emphasizes the practical ease and linguistic urf in interpreting terms from Quran and Hadith into the school of jurisprudence, and that he argues that the ordinary text is common and shouldn't affect the ritual purity. This difference matters in real life and every word. So my second term is the term Qur'an, which is in Quran Surah 2 and 2 to 8. It's mentioned the term Qur'an, which is defining a woman's waiting period after divorce. In the context of the term Qur'an is used in the context of defining a woman's waiting period after divorce. Here, Shafi'i interprets it as the purity between menstruations. Longer, and it does mas'ala. In Hanafi, Hanafi school of jurisprudence interpret it as a menstruation. It's shorter than what the Shafi'i school is considered. The linguistic root of Qur'an allows both meaning. If we check to the linguistic terms, we can see that the Qur'an allows both us to take the both meanings. Al-Baghawi sides with the grammatical reading, and Al-Jassas favors ease and practicality. This is just a scholarly debate. It affects family law courts of today, as we can see in Egypt and where the people most follows Shafi'i view, and in South Asia, some of the places where Hanafi school of jurisprudence is prominent. So there are some difference between these madhabs, and it is affecting the life of people due to this difference. So this difference in the in interpretation of linguistic terms from the Quran and Hadith have legally active. As we can see that if you are checking about modern fatwas bodies in Malaysia and Indonesia, we can say that both schools depending on context issues like there are many issues related to this term. So here the both term whether the linguistic difference in interpreting the madhabs, interpreting mas'alas by the imams have created an opportunity for the people, and it makes the Islamic law more simple and easy. So the study shows that the language is not neutral. It shapes Islamic law in both subtle and structural ways. As we can easily find out that here I have mentioned that urf, the interpretation in Hanafi madhab or Hanafi school of jurisprudence, they are focusing on urf, which is linguistic urf. We can see if the term lams is used in the urf of Arabs. They are sometimes using it as sexual intercourse. But the Shafi'i Imam, he uses the term lams as it is of its or its exact meaning as touch. So this made the difference in both school of jurisprudence, which made different laws in case of ablution. So there are many terms like this which are different in masalas because of linguistic differences. We can see that in the case of wudu itself, we can see that because of the Arab's problem in arjulikum, which means is it connected to the wamsahu or is it connected to wawasilu? So there are many differences, but I have taken these two terms because it is more discussed in the field of these studies, and it has more. It's fully the other terms or other terms which comes like this have or maybe it will be some grammatical differences only, or it is like Arab's problem. But here the both are interpreting about in these two terms, the term Qur'an and lams, both are interpreting this both are interpreting same term. There are no grammatical, but it is a urf, linguistic urf, which the Hanafi madhab is following, and the Shafi'i madhab is following the other one, because they are focusing on the what exactly the word means. And so here, in short, by analyzing the term lams and Qur'an, we see how linguistic interpretation impacts law and daily life. So if this difference has also have an impact in the modern world also, as we can see in case of many Muslim fatwa councils, fatwas. As of this for this work, I have referred to some of the fatwas that happened in Indonesia and Malaysia. So we can see that this difference, which has aroused between these madhabs, had helped in solving many issues which had happened. So this there are a lot more opportunity, lot more to focus in more terms that we can see like this. But I have taken right now these two terms, the term lams and the term Qur'an. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muhammad Jassim. So the third speaker is Luqman Hakim. He's going to speak about between text and context, Al-Ghazālī's critique of Abu Hanifa and Al-Shāfi'ī in Al-Mustaṣfā. Luqman al-Hakim is a lecturer in the Department of Civilizational Studies at Darul Huda Islamic University. His research interests include Islamic theology, legal theory, and science religion studies. In his paper, he analyzes Al-Ghazālī's critical engagement with Abu Hanifa and Al-Shāfi'ī in Al-Mustaṣfā, particularly around legal interpretations of marriage regulations and zakah. He highlights Al-Ghazālī's nuanced hermeneutics that mediate between literal readings and contextual reasoning, while also critiquing the uncritical specification of general texts. So, Luqman, you have 15 minutes. Yeah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Yousef Kamal. I am a lecturer at Civil Justice Department in Darul Islamic University, where I teach geology. And as it said, my interest areas is Islamic theology, legal theory.
Can you raise your voice a bit, or just make the mic closer?
And science and religion. As the previous speaker Jassim said, the differentiation between Shafi'i school of thought and Hanafi school, their way of interpretation and their way of hermeneutics and how language works. This presentation, also this topic, is a continuation of that. We can make sense of in the works of Imam Al-Ghazālī, Al-Mustaṣfā. He makes a argumentation or how to interpret text, what is to interpret and how not to interpret. That is a part of the discussion. And this chapter is this discussion is based on the chapter ظاهر and Tawil, apparent and interpretation in Al-Mustaṣfā and Min al-Usul. So the discussion going around the comparative analysis of and in this chapter apparent and interpretation, Al-Ghazālī harshly critiques both Imam Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa and their followers on hermeneutical divergence. Sometimes he support, in some cases he support Al-Ghazālī, Shafi'i, in some cases he support Abu Hanifa and their school, and vice versa. He critiques both of them on the topic of how to interpret and not to interpret. The study goes on the literal versus context. What had to take a literal and the contested meaning of the cases. And my case study is based on the marriage limitation for converts. The case on hadith is on converts, and marriage in Islamic tradition, the marriage is restricted for men, for 4 wives, and there are some regulations will come to later. So another one is the caste substitution in animals, and there was some cases on we have to give the exact animals for their substitution as in cash or any other commodities. The theoretic framework, the works goes on, as I said, what is the will, what is interpretation in Islamic jurisprudence, and the evidentiary evaluation. Whether to interpret a text or how to interpret is based on the evidentiary evidentiary indications known as qara'in in Usūl. So what makes a qara'in, or what is a context we can interpret text. And my presentation over the Usūl Fiqh, the chapter of apparent and interpretation goes on meaningful utterance. What is the basic structure of language? It's based on what is meaningful utterance or of al-lafzul mufid. There are 3 types of categorization. First one is explicit denotation, precision, which means precise and unambiguous utterance with no conflicting interpretation. Second one is ظاهر. Third one is Mujmal or Mubham, the utterance with multiple meanings, none have precedence over others. It is some general or undefined words which can multiple meanings, but it is not none of them have precedence over other or any overlap. So third one is ظاهر and Mu'awwal, utterance or the speech with multiple meanings that favor one over other. There are dominant one, which we call them lawyer or apparent, and there are some non-dominant, or we can call them interpretation of the will. There are for to interpret, there have two non-obvious meanings, or the context must be evidentially supported. This signifies the signification between the words and its meaning, while we have to move beyond not only semantics of the situation but semiotic structural in legal reasoning. The next, for Al-Ghazālī, there are three definitions for the next denotation. Here, one is linguistic, one is rational, and one is associative. The first one is clarity over ambiguity, which means the definition of fairness is textually unambiguous and contextually immune to alternative reading. There are no way to interpret the ness, which is the preferred definition of Al-Ghazālī for what is ness and what is not. There are some another one is apparent versus express, which is Al-Ghazālī says which is not a correct definition for express denotation ness, but this is a preference of a Shafi'i. It says we call them lawyer or the differentiation. Another one is semantic precision, which means there are some kinds of exceptions, but it says if it's acceptable uncertainty, ihtimal maqbool, we can qualify it as ness. But the uncertainty is not unacceptable or mamnu, we cannot qualify it as we cannot qualify it as ness. Coming to hermeneutics of Al-Ghazālī, in the main arguments based upon the hermeneutic scope, and he says that without a proper qara'in, without proper indicators, evidentiary indicators, we cannot make any interpretation. We cannot interpret it in other than literal ways. And he takes hermeneutics as interpretation as in a loose sense. He says that if we specify a general statement with takhsis, is also a form of interpretation, which is also a form of transition from literal to figurative interpretation. And there are three types of indicant which can be used to interpret a text, NS. He says either it is circumstantial or analogical qiyas, or another text which supports the interpretation question. He says when a conflict arises, we have to interpret to non-apparent by the distant interpretation, other will by in order to navigate the in order to not to oppose the textual meaning of the tradition, and we have to interpret distantly other will by just to leave the opposition with the textual meaning. And in aqaid matters, in rational matters only, only devoid of all any acceptable uncertainty is valid. Any weak or weak arguments, weak indicators is not acceptable in rational matters, in aqaid matters. The cases which are missing, the strength of Karina, in the case of marriages, there are some ambiguity regarding the hadith, he was a newcomer to Islam. While when Prophet says you have 10 wives at that time, only you have to choose 4 of them. And other cases, Fairuz Delimi, he was married to 2 sisters at the same time, which is prohibited in Islam. The marriage to same sisters in the same lineage, same family. So Prophet said, take 4 of them, 4 of the wife, or in the case of 10 wives, and take 1 of them in the case of sisters. The argumentation goes, Abu Hanifa, the Hanafi school of thought, takes it as literally, and you have to take 4 of them, which means in Hanafi school, they have to initiate marriage, commence the marriage from the start, not the previous act of marriage in the Jahili times. It is not acceptable, amenable when coming to Islam. So, Al-Ghazālī critiques this case as saying that it is not contextually supported because the companions of the Prophet did not understand it as it that way, and the urf at that time did not take place, and these are new converts, and Prophet ﷺ did not teach them the what is the shart or farz of the marriage. So we have to assume that from the tradition of companions and their language of their understanding of the marriage, so we have to continue the marriage in Islam when conversion to Islam. So he takes it as textual, not interpretation as followed by Imam Abu Hanifa. Another case is when Imam Al-Ghazālī abolished the text and interpreted it loosely. So the question was the zakat in substitution of zakat in animals. He says the Shafi'i thought it was only validated by the giving the exact animals in the animal sheep in the case of sheep tax or camel in the case of camel tax. It is not substituted by any other commodity or value. So Al-Ghazālī says it is we have to understand what is the context, why we give zakat. So there are some insufficiency of delis to emphasize literal reading. So he says we have to some kind of semiotics why we give them zakat. So, but he after the severe criticism of Al-Shāfi'ī, his own school of his own master of Imam of the thought, he says while the Al-Ghazālī's position of Al-Shāfi'ī stem from understanding of specification of sheep as a devotional command. This is ta'abbudi, so we have to rely upon the literal meaning. There are some sense of devotional matter. The zakat is some sort of devotional. We cannot take it as loosely interpreted in contextual reading. So there is one, and the semiotic strength of the indicant the contextual reading is not so strong as we have the interpretation of Abu Hanifa. There are many cases. I will conclude it. The main point, the conclusion will be we have to judge. Al-Ghazālī judge in the cases on what is to interpret and what is not to interpret, and we have to take some kind of legal diversity without undermining the textual integrity or that kind of. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Luqman. the fourth and last speaker is Muhammad Yousef Kamal. His paper is entitled Dialectics and Jurisprudence, a case study on the interplay of Usūl, al-Fiqh and Munāẓarah in the Nūr-al-Anwār of Mullah Jiwan. So, Muhammad Yousef Kamal is a student of Islamic sciences with a research focus on legal theory and dialectics, and active in academic debates. His paper explores how the Indian Hanafi scholar Mullah Jiwan integrates dialectical reasoning into legal theory in Nūr-al-Anwār, especially through techniques related to invalid reasoning, al-wujuh al-fasida fil qiyas, and the use of inductive and deductive methods. It situates this within the context of 18th century Munāẓarah texts, revealing the sophistication of Indian Muslim legal dialectics. Sorry. So please, you have 15 minutes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Honorable audience, respected members here, maybe the youngest person here. So there will be some mistakes when I say something. So I would like to get some suggestions from your side. So without wasting my time, I would like to firstly say that we have 3 questions that we will evaluate in my presentation. That why did I write this, and what did I write, and how did I do this? Okay, simply 3 questions. We will go through. I have some keywords to mention here in starting so that you can concentrate what's going to be discussed. Firstly, this book is a Nūr-al-Anwār. So we are focusing on Indo-Hanafic contributions in Islamic scholarship, and I will mention that how the nature of the text is. There will be a discussion on inductive and deductive, dialogical, monological argumentation theory, and also the fallacious reasoning, or what we say wujuhul fasida, invalid reasonings, and how it is some way connected to Hamlin's fallacies, as we have discussed in modern logic. And lastly, which is also a very important part, that is Munāẓarah corporation, or the patterns of Munāẓarah or Jadal, which is present in Islamic manuscripts also. So we will begin with the very beginning, that we have this book is written by Mullah Jiwan. He is a North Indian scholar. It is actually a commentary done on a text named Nūr-al-Anwār, which was written by Hafizuddin Abul Barakat al-Nasfi. He is also a Hanfi scholar of 8th century. So, and what is the most important thing we should know, and everyone should know, I think, that this text is still being studied in Dars-e-Nizami. Dars-e-Nizami is a system which has been established in Mughal era, and it is still being pertinent in India, and wherever India resides, Indians reside, in UK or Canada itself, is being studied with this commentary for Hanfi Usūl al-Fiqh. So it is must to be explored. So theoretically, I would like to start the discussion of the nature of the text. So nature of the text is generally as we know that Hanfi texts and Hanfi principles are inductive. As that's the the claim, as the Hanfi Usūl and principle was not coordinated before, or it was not known in a singular book before. So it is some way. I'm not talking about in that inductive matter or deductive matter. I'm talking about the nature of the text, how the text has been written. So the inductive and deductive. So in Manar itself, inductive, I mean by it that presenting only general conclusions of detailed dialectical debates and refutations in a concise manner. Then the author follows with a series of ramification of cases. Okay. So, for example, Al-Manar, Fil Manar, Imam Nasfi has written that Usūlu Shar'i Thalathatun wa Rabi al-Qiyas. Okay. Actually, my PPT is for some technical errors. It is not being shown here. So, Usul al-Shar'i thalathatun wa Rabi al-Qiyas. So, in the way Imam Nasafi has said, he has to say that Usul al-Shar'i arba'atun. But he did not say in this way. He said first Usul al-Shar'i thalathatun wa Rabi al-Qiyas. In the Sharah itself written by the Imam Nasafi, he asked 2 questions. That first question is, why did you is this usul of principles of legal theory is 3, and if it's not, why did not you enumerate the 4th one in first saying? In answer, the answer is not there. Answer is not even in the matan. Answer has been written by Imam Mullah Jivan. He says that actually it is just to emphasize the rulings of 4 legal principles. So first 3, if first 3 are available, the 4th qiyas will not be used. So in that manner, the text has been designed by the scholars. Okay, and when it comes to in deductive matter, that is very common, that syllogistic logic style that we use for istidlal. Okay, I mean deductive means that what deductive, that is that we know that the truth of the input proposition or premises logically guarantees the input of truth of the output. That there will be no mistake. That's a deductive. So for to engage with Islamic internal principles, Mullah Jivan has used, and with Imam Nasafi he has used the deductive inductive usages, and deductive he has used to prove his debates and dialectics of ikhtilaf literature. Later, in the text, we find some monological cum dialogical argumentation. What is this? I mean, we know Douglas Walton has written in one of his article that argumentation has 2 types. Argumentation has 2 types. First is monologic and second is dialogic. Monologic is something that we discuss. I mean, a single person will come with some claims and supporting with some evidence. There will be no interaction with the audience or the another person. And dialogic is simply when the audience is called for an interaction, and there will be a discussion, and they also enjoy the ideas. So that is dialogical. So Islamic texts, generally I would say that most of the Islamic manuscripts include monological cum dialogic style. I mean that they sometimes, when it comes to supporting their own arguments, they just say it with the arguments and claims, and there will be no discussion of the another part. And sometimes they will come with ikhtilaf literature. There will be 2 parts, 2 positions, okay, and there will be some from both sides, opposition and proposition, arguments, evidences. And then we directly go to, we have some examples. If you would have some time late at the end of the presentation, I would like to include. So thirdly, we have al-wujuh al-fasida. What is it? Invalid reasonings, or what we can say in modern time, fallacies. Okay, what actually fallacies are? Fallacies are arguments, a type of arguments that appear sound on the surface but are revealed to be flawed upon closer analysis. Right? So Mullah Jivan has done it very differently, because Imam Nasafi has just mentioned 2 or 3 terms, but he elaborated it with a different chapter that names al-wujuh al-fasida. For example, there are some logical reasonings which has been done by different schools like Shafi'i or Maliki or Hanbali. For example, I have an example that at-tansisu ala shay'in bil alam yadullu ala al-khusus. Okay, so some Ash'aris and some Hanbalis has used it. Imam Mullah Jivan writes that we have to know firstly. So for the introduction of this discussion, he first discussed that there is we must note that there is mafhumul laqab, or what we say fahwal kalam. So if something is said, it means that something has been said. Okay, and that particular thing is included. And if something is not discussed here, it does not mean that its ruling is different from or it is against or totally opposition of what is said here. So there is 2 things. Firstly, mafhumul muwafaqa, mafhumul mukhalafa. So he discussed that For example, التنسيس على شيء بالعلم يدل على الخصوص. يدل على الخصوص. Okay. So, for example, some Hanbalis deduce from hadith al-ma'u min al-ma', and it means bathing is due to ejaculation. That ghusl is obligatory only upon visible ejaculation, because the hadith has come for a khusus, so it will be working for this particular thing itself and nothing else. Means that there is a mafhum mukhalafa. There is use of mafhum mukhalafa, that intercourse without ejaculation are excluded from the ruling. Okay, so mullahs even critics this reasoning by arguing that ejaculation may either occur dalalatan, means by implication, or iyanan, by direct observation. So he says that there is a logical error, that we can say in modern time hasty generalization fallacy, which as Hamblin has discussed. So what, because there is two the line of argument can be classified as a false dichotomy. There is two binary. There is a binary that firstly is ghusl is obligatory if ejaculation occurs, and second is ghusl is not obligatory if ejaculation does not occur. Okay, so there is nothing about the dalalatan, what we said, implication. Only we are for giving ruling or giving the reasoning by iyanan, the direct observation. So the methodology of Nūr-al-Anwār of this is in this way it is a critical. It asks for criticize the mafhum mukhalafa, but sometimes it is just for some legal reasonings in such cases. But sometimes, generally, when it comes to kitab and for example, some things are discussed in Al-Hidayah and many other things, there will be some chances of being it jaiz to use mafhum mukhalafa either. Okay, and
3 minutes.
Okay, and lastly, we have munāẓarah incorporation. Generally, as we know that there is so many types of munāẓarah, that means adabul bahth, like al-mumāna'a, wal-munāqada, munāẓarah, and fasad al-wada'. So all these types of patterns of munāẓarah has been included by Imam in very detail by Mullah Jivan. Actually, Imam Nasafi has given some hints to only 2 or 3 by some examples or some names. For example, he discussed mu'arada, but he did not discuss fasad al-wada explicitly. So, for example, I have some example. I will not give everyone's example. Actually, this discussion comes under the refutation of qiyas, some qiyas which has been done by other schools. Or so there is generally 2 types of qiyas causes, tardiyah and mu'assirah. Tardiyah means efficient, and mu'assirah means effective. Means for efficient means that has been made by our own reasoning, and mu'assirah which actually has which asar or which supportive argument is actually existing in asar in kitab or in sunnah. Okay, so in mu'assirah we have some 3 types to defend this or to argue against it, and in tardiyah to refute tardiyah we have 4 types. There is detail on qalbi mujibil illa, qalbi mujibil illa, and mumana'a, munaqada, fasadul wada. So I would like to give one example slightly. That is a simple examination. For example, niyyah in wudu and tayammum. Generally, Hanfi says that niyyah is not first for wudu, but it is first for tayammum. Shafi'i school says no, it is first for both, because as both tayammum is tahara and wudu and tayammum both are tahara. So niyyah is obligatory for tayammum, and the niyyah is obligatory for tayammum. So it is obligatory for wudu also. But there is a munaqada done by Hanfis, that is, if niyyah is obligatory in wudu and tayammum because they are acts of tahara, why is niyyah not required for washing clothes or part of body? Because these things are also tahara. Okay, so and there is a reason for objection, that washing clothes and body parts also involve tahara, means purification. So by Shafi'i reasoning, these acts should also require niyyah, yet they do not. Okay. Outcome of munaqada, it forces the Shafi'i proponent to distinguish between tahara hukmiyya and tahara fiqhiyya. So when we come with this munaqada, Shafi'is were forced to distinguish between tahara hukmiyya, tahara haqiqiyya. So there will be a follow-up call with tasir even means the claim will be that both wuzu and tayammum are acts of tahara, and therefore both require niyyah as obligatory. Occasional factor and means illa was both acts are categorized as tahara hukmiyya, okay, not tahara haqiqiyya. So the call with tasir will be washing clothes are the body, washing clothes and body. Here tahara is haqiqiyya, and which is rationally understood and does not require niyyah. Wuzu and tayammum, these deal with hukmiyya purification, mean textual basis, not rationally comprehensible, and thus require niyyah as an obligatory component. So we will, there is a farq we will come with, I mean the Hanfis will come with, that is farq that water, okay, the farq is that what we say, the difference or the argument by classification, okay, farq, argument by distinction, water and dust, there is a difference between water and dust. So Hanfis come with this difference that water is something that is inherently purifying and purifies by nature, but dust is not like this. So dust should we make niyyah to make this dust capable to purify our hadas, our ourselves, and water is already a purifier, so there is no need. So in this way there is a very discussion of munazara and dialectical things inside. So I would like to thank you all, and I would like to mention and suggest that there is need for scholarship over the dialectics and logical contribution made by Indian scholars, as Asad Q. Ahmad is doing already. And I'm so grateful to stand in front of such delegates, and thank you all of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have 15 minutes left. The Maliki school is obviously absent here because we have Indian researchers, and the Indian people are mostly Hanafis, and they are busy with the Shafi'i school only. Because of the dialogue between the Shafi'is and Hanafis, with special focus on the Al-Īḍāḥ, which is a Hanbali source. So now the floor is open for a few questions in the the remaining time that we have, which is very limited and tight. So let's start with the first question.
I would like to ask the second speaker. I would like to highlight the term of Quru.
Okay, I would like to highlight the term of Quru. And it can be interpreted by the Shafi'i or Hanafi as menstruation and purity. Is that right? Okay, so I would like to compare it with the modern hermeneutic, let's say from Amina Wadud, for example, with her thought about feminism hermeneutics. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bintu Shati also said since the term of Quru is related to the woman, so is it woman personal authority to choose between the menstruation or the purity? So my question is it correct to say that there is a shift in meaning, or there's a shift in linguistic for in that term, Quru and also Lamas? Shukran.
Thank you very much. Another question? No. Okay. Can you start?
Okay. Okay. But you are asking that whether is that woman has the choice to move from one to another. Yeah. But we also know that the rules of Islamic jurisprudence. We want to follow any certain madhab and school of jurisprudence, but we can move in a if in a mas'ala we can shift to other. If we are shifting all the related terms of legal laws of that certain mas'ala, we can just shift to the other one. Otherwise, it is not allowed according to Islamic jurisprudence.
So, do you agree that there is a shift in the term of the use of the Quru or language, or it's not related to the linguistic term, or there is no change of the meaning?
al-lams, I think it's the for al-lams. Did you translate it by any means interchangeable? For al-lams, is that correct?
Yeah.
So if I understood the question here, so basically talking about the term qur, by any means, did it, or has it been interpreted as lams? No? Okay, so I'm sorry.
I mean, is there any shift in meaning from the past to the modern hermeneutics of between the menstruation and purity and the right of woman authority to choose between menstruation and purity?
No, there is no change in the from the past to modernity. This difference is it exists from the past itself. So, but these kinds of things are to be studied, and there is a option to change if we are changing the entire masalas which is related to the masala which we are going to change. That's the law of Islamic jurisprudence.
Are you referring to the authority of interpretation, moving or shifting from the classical discussion to the women today, right? Okay, yeah. So this is related to the very question of interpretation or hermeneutics itself. So do we agree that the key issue here that to discuss whether the interpretation can be gendered? This is the very question, the pre-assumption first that we have to discuss first before moving to the example that you are referring to. You see, so linguistically speaking, it has nothing to do with gender. So even in the classical time, so the issue was related to the form. I think you didn't give fair attention to the variation of the term, the original Arabic term, lems and lamas. So lamasa or lamestum, not lamestum. So I think that the whole discussion was referring to the other reading, lamestum, which has two entities or two parties involved in the action itself. So while lamasa, touch, doesn't fairly translate or interpret the original and the specific Quranic reading or variation, which is the key factor here. So this is number one. Number two, the interpretation process. It is a process. It is a process, and the interpretation or the juristic discussion is based on several evidences, not only one. That you can rarely find a juristic ruling that is dependent on only one evidence or argument. So, but because we are focusing on, or the speaker is focusing only on this individual evidence, so doesn't mean that this is the only evidence that the Hanafis used or the Shafi'is used to come to their juristic conclusions. So because this is the very nature of the juristic discussion or argumentation. So it's always have several evidences to support the same conclusion. So this is just only one of them. So sometimes it is a reductionist approach if you only rely on just one evidence and try to make general conclusions from this specific or individual evidence. Yeah. So we have to be cautious with this, I think. Any other question or comment? Yes, please.
Sure. I have a question for Muhammad Sinan, first of all.
I actually have a question for two speakers. One for Muhammad Sinan and one for Muhammad Yousef. Is it okay if I ask them both quickly? Okay. So for Muhammad Sinan, I was just going to ask, I didn't quite understand the justification of the selection of texts when it came to Juwayni and the Al-Ghazālī. I was wondering if you could just summarize that again in a sentence. And also, if you can continue your research on the Īḍāḥ, would you consider comparing it with Hanbali predecessors like Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la or Ibn Aqil even, and their Jadal work, for example? And do you think that might change some of the conclusions that you reached? The second question is for Muhammad Yousef. And al-ma' min al-ma' as an instance of mafhum al-mukhalafa. I was wondering, you identified the critique of mafhum al-mukhalafa as a hasty generalization, fallacy of hasty generalization. In fact, isn't it the fallacy of denying the antecedent in the way of if P then Q, not P, therefore not Q. If it's ejaculation, then it requires ghusl. If it's not, then it doesn't, right? This is a fallacy of the original al-ma' min al-ma' isn't formulated like a conditional, but it's semantically conditional, so it would fall under that. And if that is the case, you might be interested. There's a modern discourse that goes back at least to the 70s on something that the pragmaticists call conditional perfection, which is those instances when we hear a conditional, but a conditional is formulated for us, but we hear a biconditional, so that denying the antecedent is no longer a fallacy. So that was a comment question, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Starting with the problem of comparison, I have stated about it in that PPT template and stated by work also. Let me be very clear. Actually, the selection of Al-Īḍāḥ was as part of an upgradation or as part of an reinvention of a text that has largely or least studied. And as I earlier stated, in the very conclusion, I have brought an introduction to the or the very backdrop where the dialectics have played in medieval Jadal or medieval ages. It is very clear that Shafi'i legal thought or Shafi'i juridical dialectics was very dominant or was very formative of its successes, like Hanbali madhab. The very review was also received in my review of the article. For what I have responded that at least for the sake of bringing the text into the spotlight of prominent text like Al-Juwayni's, Al-Kafiya fil Jadal, Al-Ghazālī's. These texts were not only limited to a specific or a particular school of thought. Rather than viewing or looking into or from a doctrinal perspective, I have taken it into a broader level and anticipated its wider implications, because these texts were defining texts or the very precedents to the or in the field of juridical dialectics. And based upon these texts or with reference to these texts, how Al-Īḍāḥ as an understudied text can be looked into or compared in terms of analogy, methodology, analysis, things like this. And like Sir has mentioned, it's very plausible to compare with the same genre, like comparison with Hanbali text. The limitation, the very limitation also I have included in the research templates. From my point of view, for the sake of this upgradation or very cross-germination of ideas with Shafi'i, which is also dominant. Also, the very important thing I have to mention here is that this type of dialectics have a temporal significance too. When we view very particularly into the context of developing dialectics, that is very formative of the contemporary thought, contemporary debating thought, and so on. Temporally, the medieval was an age of largely a field of dialectical textbooks, and there were thriving discussions and we cannot unfortunately locate or pinpoint a particular discussion or a particular case that happened between two scholars like Al-Juwayni, Al-Ghazālī. But we can, based upon their biographies or based upon the happening of the work in a specific time period, we can locate what is the precedent and what is the successor. And we can also evaluate the value that they have sustained and upon which other works have been built upon. Based upon this idea, taking these two works as or viewing this work as prominent texts in juridical dialectics, I have tried to consider or look into Al-Īḍāḥ. Like there are many other texts that's largely ignored in academia. Like Khatib sir has just mentioned, there is mentions in classical Arabic text itself. But in academia, many researchers have just at least ignored these kind of texts. And the very reason I am ending, the very reason for this might be the monopoly of other school of thought like Shafi'i and Hanafi. And like sir just mentioned, Maliki and Hanbalis have been largely ignored or at least studied in terms of doctrines or texts and any other things related to it. And that kind of attempt was made from my part. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your suggestion. And actually, I missed that part. I should include that part. Actually, it has been analyzed by myself. So it may be the mistake I have done. I can improve this and nothing else.
Any other question? I just have an issue with using medieval here when we are talking about the Islamic tradition. So I think that we don't have medieval ages or when we talk about in the Islamic history. So this reflects the Western history, not the Islamic tradition. So this is one point. The other point that I think with Muhammad Yousef, I think you have in the original paper that I have read, you framed the whole discussion about Diwan's work as a Persian, as Indian within the Indian context. While I think the main issue here that you are talking about, you are referring or studying or analyzing the Hanafi tradition, which transcends the geography, because the Nūr-al-Anwār is a commentary on Anwār, right? So, and Anwār, written by an-Nasafi, is a work written to summarize and develop the work of al-Bazdawi and al-Sarakhsi, right? Dabusi. So, you can only speak about the Indian thought if you are only, focusing on the added points by Diwan. So otherwise, this is part of the very long and developing tradition, Hanafi tradition, which cannot be limited to a specific geography. So this is my point also. Yeah. Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, so I will. Yeah, please. The last question.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. طيب أعتقد لكي أكون سريعا بعض الشيء سأحاول أن أطرح السؤال باللغة العربية إذا لم يكن فيه مشكلة. طيب أنا بالنسبة لي لدي سؤال حول فكرة المناظرة مع علاقتها بالفقه الإسلامي. فنجد أنه الفقه الإسلامي ينقسم إلى مجموعة من المذاهب. هذه المذاهب يعني يمكننا القول بأنها 4 مذاهب كبرى: المذهب الشافعي والحنبلي والحنفي والمالكي. فنجد بأن الشافعية والمالكية يعتمدون على فكرة أصولية أكثر من الحنفية والحنابلة في فكرة نقاشاتهم ومناظراتهم. كيف أقول هذا؟ بمعنى أنهم يؤصلون إلى الأصل أكثر من الحنفية والحنابلة في كثير من النقاط. فما هو أو لماذا يعتمد أو في حسب التوجه في مجال المناظرة أيهما أنسب للمناظرة؟ هل للتوجه نحو الأصولية مثل المالكية والشافعية، أو نذهب نحو الحنفية والحنابلة من ناحية عدم التأصيل، عدم أخذ الأصولية في التأصيل المذهبي أو الفقهي؟ لا أعلم هل فهم.
ولكن المالكية كتب، بعض المالكية كتبوا في الجدل.
نعم، لا أقول أنهم لم يجادلوا، أنا قلت أنهم طريقة استدلالهم يؤصلون كثيرا. فهل الأفضل في ممارسة المناظرة في مجال الفقه الإسلامي، هل الأفضل ما يعتمده المالكية في فكرة التأصيل، أو أن ما يخدم المناظرة أكثر ما يعتمده الحنابلة والحنفية؟
Okay. So the point that is raised here, that the comparison between the Shafi'is and Hanafis on the one side, on the one hand, and the Malikis and the Hanbalis on the other. So the speaker here is referring to stating that the Malikis and Hanbalis are Malikis and Hanbalis, right? Maliki or Hanabila? Shafi'i or Malikiya? Maliki or Shafi'i, right? So Malikis and Shafi'is are, they rely, usually they follow the methodology of setting principles and general rules, and then they try to implement and apply these rules on the individual cases. Yes, exactly. So this is what he said. So, and والسؤال.
طيب أيهما يخدم المناظرة أفضل؟ هل الفكرة التأصيلية؟
Which methodology serves better serve the dialectical reasoning for munāẓarah?
Dialectical, there is one problem while we differentiate between dialectical reasoning and the contemporary debate. For what aspect do you want be getting answered? Debate or dialectics? I mean with dialectics, usul al-Fiqh.
لا، حسب وجهة نظري أنا أعتقد في فكرة أن المالكية أفضل من ناحية التأصيل، ولكن هل هذا الأمر أفضل في مجال المناظرة عندما نناظر بمفهومها الذي نعرفه؟ هل هو أفضل هذا التأصيل أو نذهب نحو ما يذهب إليه الحنفية والحنابلة في اللا تأصيل، في الذهاب نحو الفروع؟ يمكننا القول أكثر.
So talking about the application of this theoretical model into contemporary debate and dialogue. Okay. So first we can take into consideration forming furu upon usul, right? Building arguments upon a preset foundation of usul, like Shafi'i did and Hanabilas did. Actually, Imam Shafi'i, he was very concerned about maqasid, and so he did not explicitly wrote a work on it, but he has a very theoretical inclination in his works like or some works other than This like having a foundation and building upon this foundation, some arguments will be. I personally would prefer this to infer into contemporary debate and dialogue, and like our Abu Hanifa Imam has done, and Hanbali Imam. These two schools actually reciprocated this theoretical model, framing usul upon furu'. And the very theory of inference, when we infer something, we have to, for example, we are coming to this conference, or we are looking into a classroom where a lecture has been ongoing, and if there is a ada that the teacher drops off his chapels outside the class, if we see from outside there is chapel, we infer that, we conclude that there is teacher inside the class. So this inference is a kind of what I think this fits the best upon the first model of theoretical framework, where furu'as upon usul. From this, if we take this particular example as a model of furu or a modality of furu, we can also construct multiple inferences or examples of inferences based upon this. Like that, if we debate or argue on some idea and we have a theoretical foundation as usul, then we can apply the very we do in social sciences, we do in various disciplines. We have some theories, some preset concepts, and we extend or conceptualize various things from various dimensions, and we go further. This is also benefited from cross-disciplinary dialogues. All these also have explicit or implicit indication to the very stress of or importance of first model of theoretical framework.
ممكن أن تفضل المالكية، ولكن هناك يعني تاريخ الفقه وتأسيس وإشاعة هذه الفقه ووصول الفقه. يعني في الجانب الفقهي الحنفي نرى أنه كان هناك مناقشات مع الإمام الأعظم أبي حنيفة مع أساتذة، ويكون هناك كثير من الاستدلالات وذلك أيضا. وعند الشافعي إنهم قد كتبوا وألفوا هذه التعريفات في الأصول الفقهية، وأيضا الإمام الغزالي لديه كثير من المساهمات في مثل هذا. في رأيي ليس لدينا أن نقول بأنه هذا أفضل من ذلك، لأن للجميع هناك جوانب أساسية التي ركزت على المناظرة والجدل.
Thank you very much. I think here we have to differentiate between 2 points and to be settled before we go further in discussion. The first one is munāẓarah identical to jadal fiqhi is number one. We don't have time to discuss this. The second point that the process of forming the school, a specific juristic school, does not necessarily reflect or affect the process of arguing with other schools. You know, these are 2 different layers or tracks. So now you are assuming that there's an impact between these 2 tracks, different tracks. So this needs to be discussed. So with this, I'm going to conclude with and to close this session by thanking Muhammad Sinan, Muhammad Jassim, Luqman al-Hakim, and Muhammad Yousef. Thank you very much.